Welcome. We are in the middle of a study called A Man After God's Own Heart, the life of David in the Bible. And today we're going to be turning to 2 Samuel chapter number 15. The latter half of David's life is much sadder than the first half was. The first half was full of promise and excitement and blessing. God took this very young teenage boy and told him he was going to take the throne of Israel from the first king that ever sat on it, named Saul, and he was going to have this wonderful and blessed life, and he did. It started out fantastically. David kills Goliath. David plays the harp for Saul, but then the victories in battle began to mount, and as a result, Saul became quite jealous of David. But that even wasn't terrible. Those were times of training and growth for David to take that throne. He ran from Saul, but God protected him. David's faith in God was strong. He did have an 18-month period, no, it was a 16-month period of time where he struggled there in trusting God, went and lived with the Philistines for a little while. But other than that, he did really, really well. But then one day he decides to stay home from the battle, and he sees Bathsheba, one of his top men's wives. He calls her over to him, and they lay together. She becomes pregnant with his child, and then he has Uriah killed to cover that all up. From there on out, things begin to get bad. His son Amnon rapes his daughter Tamar, half-brother and sister there. Absalom is angry because David won't take revenge or won't at least bring justice to Amnon. And so after 2 years of waiting for David to do something, Absalom goes ahead and kills Amnon himself. That sends Absalom running. A lot of names to keep up with here. Sends Absalom running, and he ends up going and staying away from Jerusalem for 3 years. Finally, he asks if he can come back. David allows him to return after those 3 years, but he won't talk to him for 2 more years. Finally, Joab convinces David to have a meeting with Absalom, and that's the last time we met. We talked about Absalom and David seeing one another again. So 7 years has passed since Amnon did this and brought this terrible sin into this family. And now we're going to pick it up. We're only going to do the first third of this chapter today, chapter number 15, because there's a lot of narrative and a lot of story there. But we're going to show you as Absalom begins to plot his revenge against David, his own father, mind you. And it came to pass after this, after Absalom returns to Jerusalem, after he meets with his father for the first time in 3 years, Absalom prepared chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Now, first off, horses were forbidden by the Lord to be used by the Israelites in combat. Absalom doesn't care. He's going to do what he wants to do. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. And it was so that when any man that had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, Of what city art thou? And he said, Thy servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. And Absalom said unto him, See, thy matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear thee. Absalom said moreover, Oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which hath any suit or cause might come unto me, and I would do him justice. And it was so that when any man came nigh to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him. And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel that came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. So what was happening here? Absalom gets this little miniature army together, 50 chariots and the horses that would be attached to them. Chariots and horses, 50 men to run before him. Perhaps it's 50 chariots. I don't know exactly. But he gets this little force together. And then he would just stand outside the gate of Jerusalem. And he'd just hang out there all day long. And people would come to King David to get help with matters that they needed justice regarding or advice concerning. Think of the chapter 14 where the wise woman came to David for help. That's what people are doing. And this time, Absalom would meet them and he'd say, "Hey, good to see you. Are you an Israelite?" "Yeah, I am an Israelite." "Oh, what are you here for?" "Well, I'm here to see the king. I need some help from the king." And the first thing Absalom says is this: "I wish there was somebody the king would appoint in order to handle these matters so that you didn't have to wait so long to get an appointment with him." So already he's subversive in how he is handling David and his manner of leading and reigning in the kingdom. Then he says, "If only my father would make me a judge, then I could handle these matters much more speedily than they're being handled now. I would make sure everyone got justice." And he would tell them, he'd say, "If I heard your case, sounds like I'd give you what you're asking for." And then it said that he would, when people came up to him, he would put forth his hand, he would take the man, he would kiss him. So basically, he's acting like a politician here. He's trying to win over the people. And it says here, Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Who did he steal them from? From David. These people were loyal subjects of King David. David had done right by them. He had led them well. But Absalom swoops in and makes promises and steals their hearts away. Verse 7, "And it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said unto the king, I pray thee, let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron." So let's first deal with something. Verse 7, "It came to pass after 40 years." A lot of people think that's a mistake in the Bible, and they say, wait a minute, did Absalom do this for 40 years? Because David only reigned for 40 years. How could it be that from the point that David had already been reigning a number of years, now 40 years pass? And it doesn't mean that. I've studied this out, and you'll have to forgive me. I forget exactly what's going on. If I'm not mistaken, this is talking about 40 years of life that Absalom has had, or it could mean since the time of David's anointing to be the king until this time. So that's what that 40 years is talking about. I understand there are other English translations of the Bible that just change this to 4 years, and they claim that it was a scribal error. We don't particularly believe that there are any errors in the Bible. We believe it is inerrant, without error, and infallible, perfect. So that's what that's dealing with. But he then goes to the king after this time has passed, as he's been stealing the hearts of the people. And he says, let me go to Hebron. I vowed a vow to the Lord. So he uses the Lord as an excuse. For thy servant vowed a vow while I abode at Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. So he's making up this grand story to make himself look good and to use God as a scapegoat. Dad, when I was 3 years away, I promised God that if he ever brought me back here again, I would serve him. And he did, so I need to go back and pay my vow. David falls for it, and the king said unto him, go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as ye hear the sound of a trumpet, then ye shall say, Absalom reigneth in Hebron. So this is all a trap to set up his father and to perform a coup, a stealing of leadership in Israel. And with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem, so he's grown from 50 to 200 that were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. So these men didn't know what Absalom was up to, but they go with him. And then Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, when he offered sacrifices and the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. And that's where we're going to stop for the day. So Absalom has gotten permission from his father to go to Hebron, and then he goes there with 200 men who don't know what he's going to try, but he's told those who are loyal to him, when you hear the trumpet sound in Hebron, know I am reigning from Hebron. And then he brings this man Ahithophel, and he's going to come up often in the next several chapters and days to come in the story. Ahithophel is the counselor of David, and he is the one who's going to be used by Absalom to try to distort David's understanding of what's happening and even play as a double agent with David. So Absalom is being very smart, if you want to call it smart. He's being very subtle. He's being serpent-like. I'm thinking of Genesis 3, where the serpent was more subtle than every beast of the field. I'm also thinking of the time when Christ said, be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And that's what Absalom's doing. He's up to no good, but he's going about it in a really treacherous and successful manner. All right, that's all that I got for you. Thanks so much for watching. We'll pick that up at this cliffhanger tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching. God bless you. Have a wonderful day.